Hi everyone, and welcome to my continued coverage of the World Chess Championship 2013. Yesterday we had Game 6, and with Carlson having won Game 5 and going ahead 3-2, it was up to Anand to try and pull off some magic. The format is such that Anand now has 2 games in a row with the white pieces, to level out the imbalance of the players always having the same colours after the rest days. So Anand had white in this game, and he opened once again with e4, to which Carlson answered e5, as he had done in game 4, and we again saw a Berlin Roy Lopez with knight f3, knight c6, now bishop b5 and knight f6. And here Anand played the quieter and more solid d3, a move that Steinitz is generally given credit for popularizing. This removes Carlson's option of playing knight takes e4, if white had castled here instead, and going into the open lines that often feature the early queen trade, as we had seen in game 4, where Carlson gained a nice advantage. It's fairly likely that this had been in his preparation. We'll find out after the match if John Ludwig Hammer had anything to do with it, as some are speculating, and it's an understandable choice why Anand sidestepped it in this game here. However, this already gives Carlson something of a psychological upper hand in the game, because it's an indicator that Anand is afraid of Carlson's prep. So he continued here with bishop c5, and next game c3, just preparing a later d4. And white can't play bishop takes c6 here, aiming to win the e5 pawn. D takes c6, knight takes c5, queen d4 threatens mate, and forks the knight in conjunction with the mate threat. So this is just going to win the knight. And if white tries this on a previous move, then queen d4 is still the correct response from black. It's going to fork the knight and the unprotected e-pawn, take it with check. So it's not advisable to do that in Roy Lopez. So anyway, c3. Now castles, and rook e8. Black has to defend the pawn now because it's genuinely attacked with the threat of bishop takes b5 and knight takes e5. So rook e1, just preparing the d4 push, defending this pawn here. Obviously it still can't be played because there's 2 pieces attacking it, but it's preparation. So a6, bishop a4. Anand doesn't want to give up the bishop pair. In the Roy Lopez or Spanish opening, this bishop is known as the Spanish bishop, and it's often one of white's assets in the position. So b5, now bishop b3, and we're still well within theory, of course. So d6 and bishop g5, and this is the drawback of playing these bishop c5 lines. It's a nice diagonal for the bishop, but this pin is troublesome to deal with unless black wants to make weakening moves on his king side, which is definitely unpalatable here, especially for a world championship match. Something like h6 and g5 is just too dangerous for black to do. So as we'll see anyway, Carlson has an interesting way to solve this problem anyway. First he played bishop e6, which is a dynamic choice. Black generally wants to try and play d5 in these positions, after which he can more or less claim equality. The Spanish opening is sometimes referred to as the Spanish torture because it takes black so long to equalize. If white exchanges on e6, it gives black doubled pawns, but it makes it easier for him to play d5, and the pawn here on e6 will control some important squares, f5 as well as d5. And it also gives dynamic activity in the center, and perhaps on the f file as well. So Anand of course didn't want to give Carlson all of that, and he didn't trade and played knight bd2. So Carlson put the question to the bishop now with h6, and as in previous games, we're seeing lots of ideas from Nimzovich's My System in play. It's bringing these pieces to central posts with the idea that our opponent will be more compelled to trade them off because they're more powerful in the center, and this would give us the dynamic play after bishop takes e6, and other ideas like how to break the pin effectively, and the question of whether to play g5 or not, whether it's sound or unsound, whether the weakening is worth it for any kind of initiative, or is the bishop going to get trapped down here and have an inactive role, and that kind of thing. So it's lots of ideas from Nimzovich still being felt today, of course, and will be felt for a long time to come. So bishop h4 anyway, and now bishop takes b3 from Carlson. Anand didn't seem keen to trade the bishop, so Carlson initiates the trade himself, and his idea is that he's going to bring his queen to this e6 square. And as with bishop takes e6, this is a double-edged idea, playing bishop takes b3. The white pawns are doubled after a takes b3, but now white has the semi-open a file with pressure, against his pawn, and also he doesn't have to worry about weakening the c4 square when he plays d4, because this pawn will have it covered now. So Carlson now set about solving the positional problems of his position. First of all, the pin on the f6 knight here. He didn't want to play g5, to fix the pin, so he instead elected for knight b8. It's undeveloping, but it's okay because the position isn't opening up anytime soon. Black reroutes the knight this way to d7 in some lines of the Breyer variations, and this is what Carlson is up to here. He's seen that he has to do this now because Anand has the idea of playing h3 followed up with knight h2 g4, and if the knight doesn't get here in time, it's going to inflict double pawns, and now to play an h6, it's going to be a weak king side. So that's obviously no good. The other option is playing g5, but that's also not a nice move to have to play. So knight bd7, now knight h2, and queen e7. As I said, the queen is coming to e6, which is going to be a strong and stable central post for the queen. And it's also going to be eyeing b3, which is weak. So white can also play queen f3, and so the queen is going to have to stay defending f6 wherever it goes. So Anand continued with knight df1, which is a common move in the Roy Lopez, and another of the reasons that white plays rook e1. The knight's going to g3 or to e3, from where it will have a choice of nice light squares in the black half of the board. So Carlson played bishop b6, and this is so he can play knight c5, or just play the pawn to c5, both as prophylaxis against d4. If a knight's here, if d4 is played, then this pawn drops, and obviously if c5 is played, then it's going to bind the square. And this also enables black to play a5 if white ever plays b4 to try and get a grip on the queen side, and also to move the pawn away from being attacked by the queen. So knight e3, the knight's rerouting, and now queen e6, and as I said, the queen is tied down to defending this pawn, so that it stops the white queen from coming to the king side. So b4 is played by Anand, and this allows black to liquidate his weak pawn here on a6. So a5, b takes a5, bishop takes b5, and slowly but surely Carlson is solving his positional problems and steps closer towards equality. And it seems that although black is not yet equal, white doesn't really enjoy any meaningful advantage here, so it's quite a paradoxical situation that we see on the board. So knight hg4, bishop b6, and now Anand initiated some exchanges. Bishop takes f6, knight takes f6, knight takes f6, queen takes f6, and he played queen g4 with the idea of invading on the light squares, for example queen d7 and c6. And this allows black to double the white pawns after bishop takes e3. So f takes e3 is forced. If rook takes a8, queen takes f2 check is winning outright. So f takes e3, and now queen e7 to safeguard against queen d7. And white just has the tiniest of pressure here, but as I said, it's nothing meaningful. We've reached a heavy piece endgame with an almost identical pawn structure, the only difference being these doubled e-pawns of white. So it's a very level position. Neither side wants to trade rooks on the A file because that simply gives the file up, and both sides are posed with the question of how to continue. Anand played rook f1, taking the semi-open file, and this is clearly something he had envisaged after allowing bishop takes e3. So c5 from Carlson. The idea is to play c4 and undermine the e4 pawn, so to turn it into a target to attack. So king h2 is just some kind of waiting move from Anand. So c4 is gaining space and undermining e4, as I said. So d4, and now rook takes a1. Rook takes a1, and it looks like black can win a pawn with e takes d4, and then queen takes e4. But white can force the win of a pawn back in return. So it's necessary to see deep into the position before we make these very committal pawn captures. Carlson played queen b7 here to prevent the counterplay plan. But we can just show that now. If e takes d4, e takes d4, queen takes e4, the queens come off, and now rook a8 check, king h7, and rook b8, and b5 is dropping, and it's just going to be an equal endgame. No advantage for black. So queen b7 stops this rook infiltration, and it also means that black will be taking with the rook on e4, which attacks the queen, so it gains a tempo as well. So white has to do something about that. So Anand played rook d1. So now if e takes d4, rook takes d4, and the pawn is defended by the rook. So queen c6 is a good all-round positional move to win some squares and gains the option of rook takes e5 if d takes e5, because the queen is defending d6, or the rook would be taking it. So queen f5, now e takes d4 and rook takes d4. Through his pressing play, Carlson has created these weak pawns to attack. So after solving his positional problems, he now goes on the offensive. It's very, very slow, calm positional play, but very logical, and it's clear, very clear play is the probably the best way to describe it. But even despite these factors, it's still a very level endgame. I mean, there's no way that black can bring more pressure to bear on e4. White is structurally worse, but as with white's advantage earlier in the game, it's not meaningful. There's nothing actually concrete that can be done. So rook e5 from black. This just kicks the queen. Queen f3 has to stay defending e4. And now Carlson played queen c7. He wants to reroute the queen to e7, which is a better square to pressure e4 from. This, it's getting control of the e file if these pawns weren't here, and it's just better coordination. So king h1, now queen e7. And the problem for black here is that he might like to play f5, but of course he can't do that with the queen on f3. So it's kind of unclear how to make progress here. Anand played queen g4, and came king h7, queen f4, g6, king h2, and king g7. Just little by little, Carlson is making tiny improvements in his position. But as I said, it's not really clear how progress can be made here. So queen f3, now rook e6, and maybe black can go to the f file, but still, how does he continue after that? It's not really clear. So queen g3, move from Anand, is actually something that changes the whole structure of the position. The idea is to attack d6, and he's giving up a pawn here. After rook takes e4, queen takes d6, rook takes e3. So now he took the queens off, and this is what he's doesn't mind reaching, because he's going into an endgame where Carlson is a pawn up, but it should still be easily possible for white to hold, which is what Anand is playing for now, just a draw. Also, white has some initiative here and a better rook after rook d5, so attacking b5, so rook b7, and this rook is more active than a rook on b7. So there's pretty much total compensation for the pawn after rook d6. Just prevents the king coming into play. But black has this 3-2 pawn majority on the king side, so it's time to get it rolling. f6, now h4, which makes g5 more difficult, so king f7, activating the king, and now h5 from Anand, aiming to clarify the kingside pawn structure and also slow black down a little, because the d6 rook has pressure on h6, you know, if these pawns start pushing. And you know, the drawback is that black can play g takes h5, which Carlson did, and this also means that his king becomes more active. It can go to g6 now and try and move down here. And as far as black's concerned, all of these pawns are now very weak and easy to attack. And this kind of well, it's a pawn sacrifice, I guess, but you know, 99% of the time it's possible to get at least one of them back. I mean, the structure of them now is really, really bad. So you know, you often see this in master level games. You wouldn't see it in kind of club level or amateur games, because they think, no, I can't lose a pawn. They see only the material, you know. So rook d5, and now king g6, just protecting the h pawn. King g3 is bringing the king up to get active and increase the pressure on the pawns. So rook b6, ensuring there's no checks before playing f5. No need to rush. It's a good kind of idiom for the endgame. So rook c5, and now f5, king h4, and now an interesting moment. Carlson plays rook e6, and this is giving back a pawn to get his rook active. He's 2 pawns up at the moment, so you know, he can definitely afford to give one of them back in order to get activity. So after rook takes b5, rook e4 check, king h3, now king g5, gaining more space. And his idea is, after rook b8, rook g8 is threatened, and if king f4, then you know, these pawns are going to be getting rounded up very quickly. So here he played h4, and after rook g8 he can play king h5. So now rook f8 attacking f5, and now rook f4 just to protect it. And you know, it's important to note here too that this lone c4 pawn is holding back 2 white pawns. It's a single unit that holds 2, is how Capablanca referred to this. So now rook c8 to apply some pressure to that pawn, although the rook on f4 has it covered for now. And this little hidey hole for the black king is a very useful element of the position for Carlson. Without it, the game would probably be a draw. And this is another thing that we've seen in the first half of Nimzovich's My System. You know, his importance of shelters and bridge building in the end game. And here Carlson is really making the absolute most of the limited material remaining on the board. His pawns are shattered, but there's still initiative and play to be had, although black is only very slightly better despite the 2 pawn advantage that he has here. There's still no way to, you know, win quickly. So here he played rook g4 with the idea of playing after rook f8 check, sorry, just rook f8, rook g3 check, and king h2, and now king g5. And he's starting a very tricky plan that we'll get to in a moment. So rook g8 check, king f4, and now rook c8, and this c pawn is dropping. But will there be enough time for white to advance these pawns? This is the question, and this is what, you know, obviously Anand had to try and calculate over the board. And also one thing to note, he obviously shouldn't play rook takes g3, h takes g3, king h3 is forced. If king h1, king e3 is just going to mop up these pawns and queen the c pawn, and that's also what happens after king h3, just king e3. And this is just an elementary win, and black is going to win these pawns and promote his c pawn long before white can hope to do the same on the king side. So rook c8, now king e3, rook takes c4, and this now white has connected passes, so you know, this is going to be the source of his play for the end game. And this is also attacking h4. So f4 stops that threat. And we're still in a completely equal position, but Carlson is ruthless in constantly giving Anand problems to solve. Now the idea is that he can play h3, just going to force g takes h3, and after that this f pawn is passed, and it's very, very dangerous as a result. And in all lines, you know, the black king is of course much better than the white one. And here Anand blundered with the rook a4. You know, of course, it's a very complicated position, and small errors in the endgame are often fatal in this manner. You know, when compared to small mistakes in the opening or the middle game, you can generally recover from them. It might take 20 moves or something, but you know, you can recover. In the endgame, that's not the case unless your opponent blunders back. So the problem after rook a4, no, sorry, not the problem. The only move for white to save the game is b4, because now the plan that Carlson utilized in the game won't work, because white's going to have enough counterplay here. a4 turns out to be a bad square for the rook, and black's initiative is just crushing here. So rook a4 from Anand. So h3 forces g takes h3. Anything else and white just loses quickly. So now rook g6, this enables the f pawn to push. The rook was defended by it, so obviously the rook has to move first. So Anand tries c4, but now f3. Rook a3 check. No big deal, the check's just king e2. Supports the advance of the pawn. b4, and these pawns look dangerous, but they're too slow. And you know, after placing the rook on a4 a couple of moves ago, Anand cannot give checks from behind the king. If the rook had gone to c8 instead, there'd be checks, you know, and the only way for the king to get shelter would be to move in behind the pawn, after which he can't advance, and then how does he continue? You know, it's not clear. And there's probably be a draw in that instance. So now f2, and Carlson's judgment of the position has been perfect. White is now completely lost, despite being up in material. He's a pawn up now, white. So Carlson has given 3 pawns in order to reach this position. He was 2 pawns up at the beginning of the rook endgame. So it's very, very interesting, cunning and clever, and just, you know, perfect play from Carlson in this endgame, especially after the blunder from Vishy. But you know, the skill is that he just constantly gives these problems and keeps the pressure, you know, through 5-6 hours of play, just constant pressure. And you know, when you're playing someone of that kind of strength, and they just keep these traps and keep these pressure up all the way through the game, and just don't make mistakes, you just, what can you do against that kind of play? It's just you know, impossible to play against. So rook a2 check, king f3, rook a3 check, king f4, and white can't achieve any more checks here because he's given checks from the side instead of checks from behind. So Anand tried the sneaky rook a8 now, and the idea is, you know, if the pawn queens, rook f8 is going to win the queen. But Carlson played rook g1 here, of course not falling for this trap, and this keeps everything protected. After the pawn queens, the rook will be protecting it, and you know, white will be getting mated quickly. So Anand was just forced to resign in this position, and it's just a brilliant game from Carlson. There's actually an interesting line we can look at quickly. He could have under-promoted to a knight here, and objectively this is actually stronger than rook g1, although rook g1 is still completely winning. It's +9 or something, well, -9. So white is the equivalent of 9 pawns down, i.e. completely lost. So king h1 would be forced. Now knight d2 threatens knight f3 with a mating attack. White has to play rook a2 to prevent it, but now knight f3 anyway, and rook g1, the threat forces rook g2. If rook a1, rook g3 is forcing mate. So rook g2, now rook d6, threatening rook d1. So rook g4 check, make space for the king. King e3, now rook d1 to g1 is threatened, so king g2. Now h5 attacking the rook, rook g8. But now rook d2 forces king g3, h4 check, king g4, and rook g2 check wins the rook and the game. But you know, of course, there's no need to go into these crazy lines where you under promote and have to see loads of little nuances in the position, when there's an alternative that's a certain win, even if it takes a little bit longer. So it was just a great game from Carlson, and in particular a fantastic endgame. and with 2 consecutive victories he has all the momentum and confidence he could possibly need at this halfway point in the match. Victory is already well within reach. He will be feeling happy and sleeping much better than he was during the first 4 drawn games, where the pressure was massive and everything was resting on a razor's edge. Anand, on the other hand, must be despairing, sleeping badly, and feeling psychologically and emotionally wrecked as a result of the last 2 games. He even snapped a little bit at one of the journalists in the press conference after the game, which is completely out of character for him. But it's understandable given the match situation and the fact that many of the journalists just kept on repeating the same question to him in different ways. What are you going to do in response to these losses? In his matches against Topalov and Gelfand, Anand managed to come back from losses, but this match is something completely different. It's going to take a small miracle to turn the tables on Carlson with only 6 games remaining. But you never know. Anand is a tenacious player, he values his title immensely, and he's not going to let it go without a serious fight. Now he has little choice but to adopt a must-win attitude, and it will be very interesting to see how he handles the remaining games. Carlson, for his part, still needs to keep his cool and not get complacent given his 2-game lead. His dream is so close that he can hardly fail to grasp it. Presumably he will simply play solid, risk-free chess for the remaining games and punish any mistakes or overzealousness on the part of Anand. It is probable that we will see Vishy open with the king's pawn again tomorrow, and Carlson's response will be interesting. He can probably afford to play a Sicilian now, given the lead he has. The play-safe mentality when one player has a lead is not always elected. Other schools of thought say that it's best to continue playing aggressively when you have the lead. And this is an approach that actually backfired for Gelfand, but could well be effective in the case of Carlson. His response in the opening tomorrow should be a clear indicator of his mindset, and in any case the remaining 6 games will be of huge interest to the chess world. Okay, so that's it for this round. I'll be posting the next game up tomorrow afternoon. So I hope you enjoyed the analysis, and thanks for watching.